They may act like they don't care. They may ghost you, ignore your texts, or build walls higher than ever before. But what if I told you that the moment you take this one powerful step, the very thing they never expected, deep down, they'll feel the sting of losing you even if their face never shows it. This is the moment the game changes. This is the moment you take back your power. Stop pouring your love, your energy, your soul into someone who's made a habit of pulling away every time things get real. Every unanswered message you send, every double text, every moment you wait for a reply that never comes, it's not just time being wasted. It's your emotional energy being drained. And here's the brutal truth. Avoidants can feel your energy even when they're not speaking to you. They sense it. They know you're still orbiting around them. And as long as they know you're still emotionally available, they feel no urgency to change. But something powerful happens when you shift that energy inward, when you stop trying to win them over, when you stop analyzing every move they make, when you stop offering your heart to someone who won't even meet you halfway, you begin to rebuild your power. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, you'll feel the discomfort, the itch to reach out, the craving for closure, the silence that screams louder than words. That's normal. That's withdrawal. You were addicted to the idea that if you just loved them better, they'd stay. But that idea was a trap. Avoidants aren't awakened by more love. They're awakened by the loss of it. The moment you stop giving them your attention, even energetically, they notice. Even if they don't admit it. Even if they post like nothing's wrong or go on living as if they're unaffected deep down, there's a shift. It might not show on the outside, but something inside them starts to stir. That safety net they took for granted, it's no longer there. That comfort of knowing you'll always be available, always waiting, it begins to dissolve, and they feel it, not in words, but in the stillness you leave behind. This is not about making them suffer. This is not about revenge. This is about reclaiming your emotional energy, the most valuable thing you have. Because when you stop giving it to someone who doesn't know how to receive it, you make room for peace, for clarity, for healing, and most importantly, for love that doesn't leave you empty. Let them feel the absence of what they took for granted. Because you were never too much. You were just loving the wrong person too hard. And now you're done bleeding for someone who never even brought a bandage. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, they often expect a chase. They've been conditioned to believe that emotional distance keeps them in control. That if they withdraw, you'll come running. And most of the time, they're right, because silence is uncomfortable. It triggers your anxiety. It makes you question your worth. It sends you into overthinking spirals like, did I do something wrong? Should I reach out again? Maybe they just need more love. But the truth is, silence can be more powerful than any text you send or words you speak. When you stop reacting, when you stop feeding the emotional loop, your stillness becomes deafening. And that's silence. That's when avoidants feel something they never expected to feel, the weight of your absence. They may not show it. In fact, they may double down. Post like nothing's wrong, act colder, pretend they've moved on. But none of that erases the emotional imprint you leave behind. They notice when you stop trying. They feel it when your energy no longer surrounds them. Avoidants are hyper, aware of shifts in closeness. Even if they pretend they're numb to it, they crave connection. But only on their terms, only when it feels safe, only when they're in control. Your silence flips that entire system upside down. Suddenly, you're not the predictable one anymore. You're not sending the, hey, just checking in message. You're not reacting to their coldness. And whether they admit it or not, it creates confusion inside them. Why aren't they chasing me like before? Did they move on? Do they not care anymore? That uncertainty eats at them. But more importantly, your silence gives you clarity. It allows you to see the situation for what it is, not what you wish it was. You realize that love should feel safe, reciprocal, open, not like a constant emotional guessing game. Avoidants often don't know how to express regret with words. But when you stop speaking, stop chasing, stop giving it echoes. And even if they try to stay composed, something in them recognizes that they've lost something rare. Your presence. They may never tell you, but they'll remember the moment you went quiet. That's silence. That's your power. And it speaks volumes louder than desperation ever could. There comes a moment in every connection with an avoidant where you realize this isn't about love anymore, it's about survival. You're constantly tiptoeing, walking on emotional eggshells, trying not to trigger their walls, trying not to come off as too needy or too much. And somewhere in that process, you start to disappear. You silence your needs. You minimize your feelings. You settle for breadcrumbs and call it connection. But here's the wake-up call. The longer you try to prove your worth to someone who runs from intimacy, the further you drift from your own self-respect. Rebuilding your self-respect isn't about turning cold or heartless. It's about remembering who you were before you started chasing love that couldn't see you. It's about choosing your dignity over dysfunction. Every time you stop yourself from begging for clarity, every time you walk away instead of trying to decode their silence, you lay a brick of self-respect. And brick by brick, that foundation gets stronger, steadier, unshakable. Avoidants often expect you to keep showing up no matter how many times they retreat. They assume you'll keep forgiving the mixed signals, the disappearing acts, the sudden withdrawals. But the moment you stop handing out free passes, the moment you draw a line, not out of anger, but out of self-worth, that's when the dynamic shifts. They don't expect it. They've built their identity around emotional distance. And when you no longer chase, it challenges their control. Deep down, it even shakes their confidence. You see, there's nothing more powerful than the person who finally says, enough. Not with rage, not with bitterness, just quiet certainty. And when you rise from the emotional exhaustion, when you look at the mirror and finally recognize the version of yourself that's been buried under people, pleasing and self-abandonment, you become someone they never thought would leave. And whether they admit it or not, that version of you, the one who walks with calm, with clarity, with self-respect, that version leaves a lasting mark, not because you tried to change them, but because you changed the way you saw yourself. They may not come back. They may never say the words you wanted to hear, but the regret, that's theirs to carry. And the power, that's yours to keep. Avoidants are used to a pattern. Get close, feel overwhelmed, pull back, and then watch as the other person scrambles to fix the distance. They're wired to expect emotional chaos when they create space. It validates their inner narrative that closeness equals danger and that relationships always come with pressure, drama, or loss of self. But when you stop reacting the way they expect you to, when you don't spiral, don't chase, don't flood them with emotion, that's when everything changes. Breaking this cycle doesn't come from begging or explaining. It comes from self-regulation, from the strength to sit in the discomfort and not respond out of fear or need. The moment you stop reacting, you disrupt the script. You take your emotional power back. Avoidants may never say it out loud, but they are deeply sensitive to emotional shifts, especially when someone they're used to controlling suddenly becomes calm and distant. They expect you to panic when they withdraw. They expect the late-night messages, the over-explaining, the subtle guilt-tripping. But when you respond with nothing but grounded silence, it creates something they don't know how to handle: emotional responsibility. Now they have to sit with the tension they created. Now they are faced with the quiet mirror of your strength. And that mirror is not easy to look into. Reacting keeps you stuck in a loop. Every emotional outburst, every attempt to pull them back, teaches them that they can control the dynamic without ever stepping up. But when you stop playing into that, they're left with nothing to feed on. And that silence, that stillness, it becomes a mirror they can't ignore. You're not doing it to punish them. You're doing it to protect your peace. You're doing it because you finally understand that healthy love doesn't live in survival mode. You're choosing not to perform for their approval anymore. And in that choice, you give yourself something they were never able to provide: safety, emotional regulation, and inner stability. Avoidants don't change from emotional demands. They change when they feel the unexpected silence from someone they thought would never stop chasing. It forces them to question the walls they've built and why the person who once gave everything now gives nothing. That realization, though quiet and hidden behind their poker face, often leaves a deeper mark than any confrontation ever could. There's a part of you that may have dimmed your light to keep them comfortable. You paused your plans, toned down your emotions, stayed small, hoping that if you just became less, they'd stay. that if you gave them space, suppressed your needs, and made life easy for them, maybe they'd finally feel safe enough to love you back fully. But all that really did was disconnect you from yourself. You started living life around their comfort zone, and in the process, abandoned your own growth, your joy, and your passion. It's time to flip that story. You don't need permission to live a bold, vibrant life. You don't need approval to chase your dreams, laugh too loud, feel deeply, or take up space. You were never meant to shrink just to be loved. And when you stop waiting for the avoidant to notice you, to validate you, to finally come around, you start creating a life that reflects your true self, not your anxious attachment. The moment you pour that energy back into you, everything shifts. You pick up the hobbies you left behind. You reconnect with people who uplift you. You start showing up for your goals with new fire. You go places. You do things. You invest in your growth, not to make them jealous, not to get a reaction, but because you deserve a full life, whether they're in it or not. And what happens on the other side? They notice. Avoidants may act indifferent, but they are deeply tuned in. When they see that your life is expanding without them, when you're growing, and no longer orbiting around their avoidance, it stirs something in them. It challenges the narrative they created that you needed them more than they needed you. It confronts them with the reality that you're capable of happiness, joy, and connection without their permission. They may not say a word. They may even try to play it cool, but they see it. They feel the distance growing, not just physically, but energetically. And while you're out there reclaiming your life, creating joy, and building momentum, they're left with the discomfort of realizing they're no longer the center of your emotional world. This is how you rise, not by forcing them to change, but by refusing to stay stuck in a version of yourself that was built around their limitations. And when you finally start living like you matter, they'll feel the gap your growth created and regret the space they left behind. Love isn't just about chemistry or connection. It's about standards. And somewhere in your connection with the avoidant, you may have started lowering yours. You told yourself that the hot and cold behavior was just their way. You tolerated inconsistent communication, emotional distance, and confusion because deep down, you were hoping it would eventually stabilize. That one day, they'd wake up and finally meet you at the level you were loving them from. But love that leaves you feeling anxious, unseen, or unworthy isn't love, it's survival. And every time you settle for less, you teach them that they don't need to do more. Avoidants rarely take initiative to change unless something disrupts their pattern. And nothing is more disruptive than you raising your standards and actually enforcing them. When you decide, I will no longer accept one-sided effort. I will no longer confuse withdrawal with emotional depth. I will no longer wait for someone to realize my value. That's when everything starts to shift. Setting a new standard isn't about ultimatums or threats. It's about your energy. It's about the way you speak to yourself, the boundaries you create, the silence you maintain when your needs are ignored. It's about no longer explaining over and over why consistency matters, why respect matters, why you matter. Instead, you let your actions speak. You disengage from anything that makes you feel small. You stop participating in patterns that disrespect your heart. Avoidants are used to people bending. They're used to second chances, to being chased, to being forgiven without real change. So when they meet someone who simply doesn't play that game anymore, someone who walks away not to manipulate, but because they've finally remembered their worth, it challenges them deeply. Because it forces them to realize that not everyone is willing to wait around for them to grow. This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting your peace. The truth is, some people only begin to grow when they lose access to your grace. When they feel the absence of your empathy, your patience, your love, that's when the mirror shows up. And it's not your job to hold that mirror for them anymore. You don't need to scream your standards. You live them. And those who are ready will rise to meet them. Those who aren't, they'll fall away. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Because love isn't real unless it meets you where you actually are, not where you're willing to shrink. At some point, they're going to sit with a quiet moment, a pause between distractions, a breath between texts, a gap in their day, and your memory will surface. Not because they planned it, not because they're trying to bring you back into their thoughts, but because they can't help it. The way you made them feel, the way you showed up, the depth you offered, the patience you gave, the love you consistently extended despite their emotional distance. It lingers, and it always will. You were the one who stayed when they pulled away, the one who tried to understand their silence instead of condemning it, the one who loved them without trying to change them, even when that love wasn't returned with the same depth. You showed up for them in ways they didn't even know they needed. And when they failed to show up for you over and over, you still gave them grace. But then something in you shifted. Maybe it was slow. Maybe it came suddenly. But you finally realized this isn't love if I'm losing myself to keep it alive. When you stopped chasing, when you stopped explaining your worth, when you walked away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, that's when you became the one that got away. Avoidants often don't realize what they had until it's gone. Not because they didn't value you, but because they never fully allowed themselves to feel it. Emotional closeness terrifies them, so they block it out. But just because they avoid doesn't mean they forget. In fact, your absence creates a deeper imprint than your presence ever did. They remember your softness, your consistency, the emotional safety you offered that they weren't ready to receive. They may pretend to move on. They may even be with someone new. But when you truly embodied your worth and walked away with your head held high, you became the story they'll revisit in their mind. The one they mishandled, the one they couldn't hold, the one who finally stopped waiting. Regret doesn't always come with grand gestures or apologies. Sometimes it shows up in their silence, in their subtle checking of your social media, in the way they talk about you like a distant memory they still don't know how to process. You became the exception they couldn't keep, and no matter how long it takes them to realize it, your energy, your love, your truth, it left a mark they'll never be able to erase. When you're entangled with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it's easy to lose yourself. You begin to question your worth, doubt your instincts, and make excuses for behavior that drains your spirit. You keep telling yourself they'll come around if you just give more, love harder, or stay patient a little longer. But there comes a moment when your soul whispers the truth. You've done enough. And that's when the real transformation begins. Not in them, but in you. The power doesn't come from changing the avoidant. It comes from reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away while trying to be enough. For someone who never learned how to receive love, the moment you stop chasing and start redirecting your emotional energy inward, everything shifts. They may not say it, they may not even show it, but they feel it when you pull back, not out of manipulation, but out of self-preservation. Your silence carries weight. Your absence speaks volumes. And in that quiet space you leave behind, they are forced to face the void they created. They're confronted with the reality that you're no longer available to play the same emotional tug of war. And that realization stings, not because you punished them, but because you finally stopped punishing yourself. As you rebuild your self-respect and refuse to react the way they expect, your entire presence changes. You're no longer trying to convince them of your worth, you're embodying it. And that energy is magnetic. You start to live fully, without shrinking, without waiting, without needing their validation. And ironically, that's when their mask begins to crack. That's when the regret creeps in, hidden behind their pride and silence. They thought you'd always be there. They assumed your love was endless. But you finally taught them a lesson they never saw coming. Even the most loyal hearts have limits. You stopped tolerating confusion and called it clarity. You set new standards not to make them chase you, but to honor your own growth. And in doing so, you became the one that got away. Not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready. Avoidants often don't recognize the rarity of what they had until it's gone. And when they finally sit with the reality that you're no longer theirs to return to, the regret will sit heavy in their chest, whether they admit it or not. So let this be your truth. You didn't lose them. They lost you. And in that loss, you found the most powerful thing of all, yourself. You rose from the chaos, from the confusion, from the heartbreak, and built a version of you that no longer needs to beg for love that should have been freely given. That's not just growth. That's liberation. And that is where your story begins, not with them, but with you. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If this message spoke to your heart, If it gave you clarity or strength during a difficult time, know that you're not alone. Every step you take toward healing self-worth and emotional freedom is powerful, and you deserve love that doesn't make you question your value. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the truth your heart needs to hear. Your support helps this channel grow and helps more people break free from unhealthy emotional patterns. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story, your strength, or even just a, "Yes, I needed this." Hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when new uploads drop. Until next time, stay grounded, stay powerful, and most importantly, stay true to you. This is your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye for now.